Darius Okafor was 41 years old, and until that Thursday morning, he believed his wife of 9 years was simply going through something. A phase, a distance, a restlessness he could patient love his way through. He had built everything quietly. A thriving Atlanta architecture firm, generational wealth nobody knew about, and a marriage he funded without complaint. When the red flags came, the locked phone, the unexplained tan, the laughter on calls that didn't sound like the woman he married, he didn't explode. He didn't confront. He did something far more dangerous. He called his bank, removed the ceiling on a joint credit card Camille didn't know was upgradable, slipped it into her purse with a handwritten note that read, "Treat yourself this week. You deserve it," and waited. He gave his wife an unlimited credit card to test her. Then he got a text from his accountant. Activity had started at Phipps Plaza. Darius closed his laptop, picked up his keys, and drove. What he saw when he arrived, his wife spending $100,000 of his money on another man, then reaching across a restaurant table to cover that man's hand with hers, didn't break him. It built him into something his wife never saw coming. And she had no idea that the card she was spending so freely was already the first brick in her own destruction. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The pencil moved before the coffee finished brewing. That was how it had always been with Darius Okafor. The mind started first. The body caught up later. By the time the kitchen filled with the smell of dark roast, he had already roughed out 2 load-bearing revisions on the Decatur mixed-use project. Small corrections, the kind most architects wouldn't catch until the 3rd review. Darius caught them before sunrise. His home studio was a modest room at the back of the house, not large, not decorated to impress anyone. The walls held framed blueprints, some his, some historical, a 1962 cross-section of a Tadao Ando concrete structure he had loved since graduate school. His desk was wide and clean, except for what was actively being worked. A single lamp threw a cone of yellow light across the drafting table. Everything else in the room sat in quiet shadow. On the shelf above his monitor, spine creased and cover soft from years of handling, sat the copy of The Fountainhead his father had pressed into his hands the morning Darius left for college. His father had said only 4 words: read it, then build. Darius had done both. He was 41 years old. He had built a structural architecture firm from a single drafting table in a 1-bedroom apartment. He had quietly acquired 7 investment properties across metro Atlanta, all held in LLCs he had established before he ever met Camille. He drove a 5-year-old truck he kept immaculate. He dressed without flash. He let the work speak. Most people who met him at charity galas or industry dinners assumed he was comfortable. They did not know the full number. Darius had decided long ago that was precisely how he preferred it. The marriage had been good once. He believed that, and he tried to hold on to it honestly, without revision. Camille was brilliant in rooms full of people, magnetic in a way that made strangers feel chosen simply by being near her. She had a laugh that could reset the energy in a space. In the early years, she had turned that warmth on Darius like a light, and he had felt it in his chest every time. 9 years. No children. Not yet. Not yet, she always said. And he had always nodded, patient, believing they would get there when she was ready. He had funded everything without complaint. The 4-bedroom house in Alpharetta, the annual vacations that grew more expensive each year, the boutique marketing consultancy she had launched 6 years ago with his capital and his encouragement. The consultancy limped. He supplemented quietly. That was who he was. But something shifted 4 months ago. He could not point to a single moment. It was structural, the way damage in a building rarely announces itself all at once. Instead, it accumulates in hairline cracks you have to know how to read. Camille's phone had always sat on the nightstand unlocked. One morning in late winter, it was locked. New passcode. She offered no explanation, and Darius asked for none. He filed it away. A weekend trip in March. 3 days with her friends in Savannah, she said. She came home with a tan that went past her collar and a relaxed looseness in her shoulders he hadn't seen in months. He asked to see photos from the trip. She said she hadn't really taken any. You know, I'm bad at that. He had never known that about her. Camille documented everything. Then there were the phone calls. He would pass the hallway and hear her laughing behind the closed bedroom door. Not her regular laugh. Not the social one she used at dinner parties. This one was softer, younger almost, like a woman talking to someone she was still trying to impress. Darius had not confronted her. He was not a man who moved on feeling alone. He moved on what he could see, measure, and verify. He had been watching. He had been waiting to be wrong. He was no longer sure he was wrong. He set down his pencil and reached for his coffee. He drank it slowly, looking at the wall of blueprints without really seeing them. Then he picked up his phone and called his bank. The card was technically a joint account, opened 8 years ago, used occasionally for shared household purchases, sitting in Camille's wallet with a $500 ceiling she had never questioned. She had no reason to question it. Darius had never raised it. The call took 11 minutes. When it was done, the ceiling was gone. Unlimited. He did not tell Camille. He went to his desk, pulled a note card from the top drawer, and wrote 7 words in his clean, even handwriting. Treat yourself this week. You deserve it. He tucked the card into the note card's fold, walked to the entryway where Camille's bag hung on its hook, and slipped it inside the inner pocket. Then he made himself a second cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table and waited. Camille came downstairs at 7:45 in her silk robe, moving through her morning the way she always did. Unhurried, practiced. She poured coffee. She checked her phone. She reached into her bag for her lip balm. Her fingers found the note card. She read it. She looked up at Darius with a smile that came fast and wide and filled her whole face. It did not reach her eyes. "Baby," she said. "That is so sweet." Darius smiled back and sipped his coffee. The call to Victor Osei lasted 6 minutes. That was all it needed to. Theirs was not a friendship that required a lot of explaining. Darius laid out what he needed: daily summaries of card activity, real-time alerts if anything unusual moved. And Victor said, "Send me the account details. I'll set it up tonight." No questions about why. No lecture. Just the quiet efficiency of a man who understood that when Darius Okafor asked for something like this, there was a real reason behind it. They had met as freshmen at Georgia Tech, 2 sons of West African immigrants who had both shown up to campus with the same second-hand graphing calculator and the same absolute refusal to fail. 22 years later, Victor ran a forensic accounting practice out of a clean, modest office in Buckhead. He was the most precise person Darius had ever known. He did not guess. He did not speculate. He found what was there and reported it exactly as it was. That was exactly what Darius needed. The first 3 days were quiet. Monday, a nail salon on Roswell Road, $65. A grocery run at the Publix they always used, $112. Nothing unusual. Darius read Victor's summary on his phone before bed and set it face down on the nightstand. Tuesday, a charge at Noura, a Lebanese place near Perimeter that Camille went to regularly with her friend group. $94 for 2. Darius looked at it for a moment, then let it go. She had mentioned lunch with her friend Kezia. That fit. Wednesday, a gas station, a pharmacy, a bookstore, small numbers, ordinary life. Darius sat with that for a while. He was at his drafting table each morning, as usual. He reviewed bids, answered contractor emails, finalized details on 2 projects running parallel. Life moved at its normal pace. Camille made dinner on Tuesday. They watched something on television he could not remember the name of afterward. She laughed at one point and touched his arm without thinking about it, the easy reflex of a long marriage. He started to wonder, quietly and with some discomfort, if he had been wrong. Not fully wrong. The locked phone was still a fact, and the Savannah trip with no photos was still a fact. But wrong enough. Maybe the suspicion had been disproportionate. Maybe the unfamiliar laugh behind the closed door had been a college friend, an old co-worker, someone ordinary. Maybe he had looked at a collection of small things and assembled them into a shape that wasn't there. He didn't let himself feel relieved. Not yet. But the tension in his chest had loosened by a degree or two, and he noticed it. Thursday morning, he was at his desk by 7. A set of contractor bids for the Decatur project were spread across the table in front of him. 3 different concrete subcontractors, all with different numbers, all with reasons for the variance he needed to evaluate carefully. He had a red pencil in his hand and a legal pad for notes. He was working through the second bid when his phone lit up on the corner of the desk. Victor. 10:52 a.m. Activity just started at Phipps Plaza. Watching it in real time. Numbers moving fast. Darius read it once. Then he read it again. He set the red pencil down on the legal pad. He looked at the contractor bids spread across his desk. The neat columns of figures, the highlighted line items, the work he'd been focused on for the past hour. For a moment, he just sat there, very still, the way a structure is still in the seconds before something shifts inside it. Something cold settled in his chest. Not panic, not rage. Something quieter and more certain than either of those things. The looseness he'd felt over the past 3 days, the small, private hope that he'd been wrong, was gone. Just like that, as if it had never been there. Phipps Plaza was not a grocery store. It was not a nail salon or a Lebanese restaurant near Perimeter where a woman might have lunch with a girlfriend. Phipps Plaza was Gucci and Tiffany and Porsche design. It was the kind of place where people went to spend serious money on serious things. Camille had not mentioned going to Phipps Plaza. She had not mentioned anything about today at all. He closed the bid folder. He stood up from his desk, straightened the edges of the contractor bids, and stacked them neatly to the side. He picked up his phone and reread Victor's message one more time, watching the timestamp, 10:52, and doing the quiet math of how long she'd already been there. His keys were on the hook by the studio door. He told himself, clearly and precisely, what this was. He was going to drive to Phipps Plaza. He was going to look. He was not going to call Camille. He was not going to walk up to anyone. He was not going to cause a scene in the middle of a shopping mall. He was simply going to see what there was to see. He picked up his keys and walked out. Phipps Plaza on a Thursday morning was quiet, the way expensive places are always quiet. No crowds, no noise, just the soft click of heels on polished marble and the kind of air that smelled faintly of leather and perfume and money. The storefronts were lit from inside like jewelry boxes. Everything was arranged to make you feel that spending was the most natural thing in the world. Darius walked through the entrance and moved at an even pace, not fast, not slow. The way he walked a job site when he needed to take in everything at once, without tipping off the crew that something was wrong. Hands at his sides, eyes steady. A man who looked, from any angle, like he simply belonged there. Victor's updates were coming in through his phone. He felt it buzz twice in his jacket pocket before he even reached the main corridor. He didn't stop to check them. Not yet. He moved deeper into the mall, past a luggage retailer and a men's clothing store, noting their positions out of habit. The layout of a space always registered with him automatically. Exits, sight lines, the way foot traffic tended to pool near certain intersections. He had been doing that since his 20s. Then he saw them. Not through searching, just through looking. And there they were, framed in the wide glass window of a men's watch boutique, like something staged for him specifically. Camille stood at the display counter in a light-colored dress he recognized, her posture easy and animated, the way she got when she was performing for someone she wanted to impress. She was talking to the sales associate, gesturing toward the case. Beside her stood a man. Darius slowed, stopped. He was tall, broad-shouldered, well-dressed in a pale linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. He had his wrist extended across the top of the display case, and the sales associate was positioning a watch against his skin. The man tilted his head and looked down at it with a small, satisfied smile, like he had already decided. It took Darius a moment to place him. Then it came. A charity gala, 2 years back. A firm fundraiser for a children's hospital. The man had worked the room that night with a lot of handshaking and loud laughter. Preston Wakefield, commercial real estate. They had spoken for maybe 4 minutes near the bar, exchanged cards out of social reflex, and Darius had never thought of him again. He was thinking of him now. Darius stood outside the window and watched Camille pull a card from her wallet. His card. She set it flat on the counter with a single, unhurried motion, the way a person pays for something they have already decided belongs to them, and smiled at the associate while the transaction processed. $18,500. Victor's message confirmed it 11 seconds later. Darius did not move. He stood there long enough to see Preston fasten the watch to his own wrist, turn it in the boutique light, and nod once with approval. Camille watched him do it with an expression Darius recognized. He had seen that expression aimed at him a long time ago. He turned and walked. He stayed back. 30 feet. Sometimes more. He was good at being unnoticed. Another job site skill. The ability to observe without disrupting what he was watching. The luggage retailer was next. Preston stood with his arms loosely crossed, while Camille moved between 2 display sets, both hard-sided, both matching, both in a shade of deep burgundy. She spoke to the associate with quick, decisive energy. She chose the larger of the 2 sets without hesitation. She slid the card again. The men's clothing store after that. Preston moved to a rack of jackets near the back and pulled one free. Charcoal wool, well cut, the kind of piece that cost what it looked like it cost. He shrugged it on and turned toward the mirror. Camille walked a slow circle around him, her head tilted slightly, evaluating. She said something. He laughed. She reached out and adjusted the collar with both hands, smoothing it flat across his shoulders, and stood back to look. Darius watched from outside the storefront, one shoulder angled toward a column, and felt something move through him that he did not have a word for. Not grief exactly, not rage, something colder than either, something that simply recorded what it saw and filed it away. His phone buzzed again. He checked it. Total through last transaction, $74,300. Still moving. The restaurant on the upper level was called Lure. Glass walls, warm lighting, the kind of place that was already doing a quiet but serious lunch service. Camille and Preston were shown to a corner table. The good corner, the one with the long view of the room, the one where people who felt comfortable being seen liked to sit. Darius stopped at the railing overlooking the lower level, positioned where he could see their table clearly, without being in their sight line. He watched them settle in. The way Preston leaned back in his chair like he owned the square footage. The way Camille tucked her bag under the table and picked up the menu without looking at it. She already knew what she wanted. Or she was not concerned with the menu at all. They were talking. She said something, and he responded, and she tilted her head back slightly and laughed. His phone buzzed. $100,000. Crossed at 12:41 p.m. Lunch charges still processing. Darius looked down at the table. He watched Camille reach across it and lay her hand over Preston's. Easy. Without hesitation. Like she had done it 1,000 times. He stayed at the railing for 45 seconds. He counted them. Then he turned and walked back toward the parking garage. His truck was on the 3rd level. He unlocked it, got in, and pulled the door shut. He sat with both hands on the steering wheel and looked through the windshield at the concrete wall in front of him. He did not cancel the card. He did not call Camille. He pulled up his contacts, found the name he wanted, and pressed call. It rang twice. "Hey, baby," Aunt Rochelle said. "I need you to come over tonight," Darius said. His voice was even, completely level. "Bring your reading glasses. We have work to do." Aunt Rochelle arrived at 7:15 with her reading glasses hanging from the collar of her blouse and a pound cake in a foil pan that she set on the counter without a word of explanation. She was 63 years old and moved like a woman who had decided, somewhere around 45, that she was done being in a hurry. She wore a dark cardigan and flat shoes, and her silver-streaked locks were pinned back from her face. She had spent 30 years as a paralegal, 30 years sitting beside people in the worst moments of their lives, reading documents that could end marriages and businesses and careers. And she had learned a long time ago not to let her face react faster than her mind. She looked at Darius when she came through the door, looked at him the way she always did, straight and without softness, taking an honest inventory. "You eat today?" she said. "Lunch," he said. She nodded once, like that was acceptable, and followed him to the kitchen. He had laid it all out on the table while he waited for her. Organized the way he organized everything, cleanly, in sequence, with nothing overlapping. The credit card statements were on the left. Victor's real-time summary from the mall was printed in 2 pages, each transaction time-stamped and itemized. On the right side of the table were the photographs, 6 of them, printed at the office before he came home. The best one showed Camille through the boutique window, her arm extended, the card flat on the counter and Preston's wrist beside it. Another caught them at the restaurant table, Camille's hand on top of his. They were not dramatic photographs. They did not need to be. They showed exactly what they showed. Aunt Rochelle pulled out a chair, sat down, and put her reading glasses on. She went through everything slowly. She did not gasp. She did not shake her head or click her tongue or offer any of the sounds people made when they were performing their reaction for someone else's benefit. She read. She turned pages. She studied the photographs for a moment each, then moved to the next. When she finished, she took her glasses off and held them loosely in one hand. "This didn't start last week," she said. "No," Darius said. "How far back do you want to go?" Darius had been standing near the counter. He came to the table now and sat across from her. 2 years, he said. "At least." She put her glasses back on. "Then call Victor tonight." Victor pulled 2 years of shared financial records over the next 72 hours. He worked the way he always worked, quietly, thoroughly, without commentary, until he had something solid enough to stand on. He sent Darius a summary on Sunday evening with a follow-up call that lasted 40 minutes. Darius sat at the kitchen table and listened. The joint household account, the one Camille had managed since the 2nd year of their marriage, the one Darius had trusted her with because she handled the day-to-day and he was building projects, told a story that had been written carefully, over a long time, by someone who understood that small numbers did not attract attention. $400 moved out in March of the prior year, $750 in April, $320 in June. Irregular amounts, irregular dates, never the same figure twice in a row. Each transfer listed under a category called Home Services, MISC. The destination was an account Darius had never seen before, registered under a name he did not recognize. A business name, 2 words, clean and generic. Over 26 months, the transfers totaled $67,480. Darius wrote the number down on a notepad in front of him. He pressed the pen down harder than he needed to. Victor kept going. Camille's marketing consultancy. The business Darius had subsidized for years, the one that had never quite found its footing, the one she always said was just starting to gain momentum, had a client list. Victor had obtained it through the business registration and a few additional sources. The second largest client on that list was Preston Wakefield's brokerage, a contract signed 14 months before the mall visit. 14 months before Darius had any reason to suspect a thing. Victor had pulled the invoicing records. Camille had been billing Preston's company at rates significantly above what any comparable service would cost. The overage, the difference between a legitimate fee and what was actually being charged, was being routed out through a third-party payment processor and into a personal account. Darius's money, traveling from his household account through Camille's consultancy, and from there into a shadow account he was never meant to find. Darius thanked Victor and sat in the kitchen after the call ended. He thought about the word affair, how small it was, how it implied something impulsive, something human even, in a broken kind of way. This was not that. This was a plan. It had an architecture, foundations laid months before the first obvious sign, load-bearing structures built quietly in plain sight, exits mapped and funded on someone else's money. His money. He heard Aunt Rochelle come in from the living room. She had stayed. She stopped at the table, looked at the notepad, and looked at Darius. She reached over and picked up Victor's printed summary. She read it, standing up. Then she set it down. She took off her reading glasses. "Baby," she said quietly, "she's been stealing from you." Darius did not speak for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car moved slowly down the street. "Then she needs to pay it all back," he said. The pound cake was still on the counter when Darius came downstairs at 5:40 the next morning. Rochelle had gone home around midnight. Before she left, she had stood in the hallway with her coat on and her keys in her hand, and looked at him with the same level expression she had worn all night. "Don't call her," she said. "Don't say a word to her yet." "I know," Darius said. "I mean it. You go at her right now. All you get is a fight. Maybe a lawyer who talks her into hiding whatever's left." She paused. "You want a fight? Or you want everything back?" "Everything back," he said. She nodded. "Then be patient. You're good at that." She left. He locked the door behind her and stood in the quiet hallway for a moment, and then he went to bed. He was at the kitchen table by 6 with a legal pad, a pen, and a cup of coffee. He wrote 3 names down in a column. Then he picked up his phone. The first call was to Victor. Short and direct. Darius needed him to keep pulling, specifically on Preston's business filings, anything registered with the state, any commercial property tied to his name, any outstanding liens. Victor said he would have something by the end of the week. He did not ask why. He never needed to. The second call was to a private investigator named Ray Coombs, a name Adrian had given him 2 years ago during a conversation about a contract dispute, a name he had written down and never used until now. Darius explained what he needed plainly: documentation, photographs, dates, times, locations, proof that Camille and Preston Wakefield were together, and proof that Darius's credit card was still being used to fund it. Ray asked a few questions, took the information, and quoted him a weekly rate. Darius agreed without negotiating. The third call was to Adrienne. Her full name was Adrienne Marsh, and she had spent 18 years in marital asset litigation. 18 years untangling what people built together and what they hid from each other. Her voice on the phone was brisk and businesslike, but she listened without interrupting while Darius laid out the situation in clean, sequential order. The card, the mall, the 67,000, the consultancy, the payment processor. When he finished, she was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Don't touch the card yet," she said. "Don't close any joint accounts. Don't move any assets. Don't say anything to her." A pause. "Can you do that?" "Yes," Darius said. I'll need Victor's documentation and whatever your investigator produces. We build the full picture first. Then we move all at once. Another pause, shorter this time. She doesn't get to see it coming. Understood, Darius said. He ended the call, set the phone down, and looked at the legal pad. 3 names with 3 check marks beside them. He tore the page off, folded it twice, and put it in his jacket pocket. For the next 2 weeks, Darius played the role of a man who did not know a thing. He was good at it, better than he expected, though part of him understood that the skills required were not so different from the ones he used every day. On a job site, you did not show the contractor your concerns before the inspection. You smiled, you asked questions, you kept your voice even, and you watched. He took Camille to dinner on Wednesday of the first week, a restaurant she liked in Buckhead, with low lighting and an expensive wine list. He asked about her week. She told him about a client call that had gone well, about a disagreement with a vendor she was managing, about a yoga class she was thinking of trying. She was relaxed and warm and utterly convincing. He refilled her glass and asked a follow-up question about the client. She answered it without blinking. He had expected the lying to feel different, expected to see some flicker of discomfort in her, some small tell that would make it visible. But there was nothing. She lied to his face, the way a person breathes, easily, without effort, as though she had been doing it so long that the habit had become the person. He drove home afterward with his hands loose on the wheel and his face calm. He filed it away. Ray Coombs delivered his first set of photographs at the end of week 1. Preston's condo building on a Thursday evening, Camille's car in the lot. A restaurant in Midtown, the 2 of them at a window table close. A hotel in Alpharetta the following weekend. A 2-night stay, a portion of it billed to the card that was still, deliberately, active. The documentation was clean and thorough. Dates and times stamped on each image. A written log attached. Darius reviewed it at his desk at the office with the door closed, and then put it in a locked drawer. At the end of week 2, Victor called. He had pulled Preston Wakefield's business filings, all of them, and what they showed was not the profile of a successful commercial broker operating at the level his reputation suggested. 2 commercial property investments were in default, both flagged in filings from the prior 6 months. A lien from a private lender had been recorded against Preston's name, $340,000 past due, with a pending acceleration notice attached. Preston's condo, the same building Ray had photographed Camille entering, had been quietly listed for sale 14 days ago. Victor's voice was flat and precise as he walked through the numbers. Then he said, "The consultancy payments Camille's been receiving, the ones routed from Preston's brokerage? He's been using them to make minimum payments on the private loan. Darius." A pause. "He's been running on your money." Darius thanked him, ended the call, and drove to his office building. He sat in the parking garage with the PI's report and Victor's summary spread open on the passenger seat. Preston Wakefield had not simply pursued his wife. He had identified Darius, a man he had never properly met, a man he had dismissed without a second thought, as a financial resource to be accessed and drained. He had used Camille as the instrument. He had used Darius's own household account as his personal lifeline. And he had done it all while Darius was sitting at his drafting table at 5:40 in the morning, working. Darius stared at the windshield. He allowed himself 60 seconds. In those 60 seconds, he felt the full weight of it, the years of work, the trust, the marriage he had believed in completely, the money that had moved quietly out of his life and into the hands of a man who had never built a single thing worth standing on. His jaw tightened. His hands pressed flat against his thighs. 60 seconds. Then he picked up his phone and called Adrienne. Adrienne Marsh's office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Atlanta, clean and spare. with a view of the skyline that Darius took in for exactly 1 second before sitting down. Her desk had nothing on it except a legal pad, a pen, and the file folder he had sent over through Victor 2 days prior. She had read every page of it. He could tell by the way she moved through it now. Not scanning, not searching, but confirming. The way you review a document you already understand. She set the folder down and folded her hands on top of it. "Your LLCs are clean," she said. "All 7 of them. The formation dates are years before the marriage, the operating agreements are properly structured, and there is no commingling that would give a court reason to reclassify them as marital property." She held his gaze. "Those properties are yours. Your investment accounts tied to the LLCs are yours. Whatever is inside them stays inside them." Darius nodded slowly. "The joint checking account is marital property. The house is marital property." She paused. "Do you want the house?" "No," he said. "Good. It simplifies things." She made a note. "We'll include it in the asset division. You'll get your half of the equity. Given the $67,000 in diverted funds, we'll argue for an unequal distribution in your favor. With Victor's documentation, that argument is strong." She opened the folder and laid 3 pages side by side on the desk. Victor's financial summary, Ray Coombs's surveillance log, and Darius's own photographs, the watch boutique, the restaurant table, Camille's hand over Preston's. She looked at them the way Rochelle had, without flinching. "This is a complete package," she said. "The financial diversion, the fraud on the credit card, the documented pattern of the relationship, and the business arrangement tying Preston's brokerage to the consultancy." She looked up. "I want to file Thursday. This week." "Thursday," Darius repeated. "I'll have the divorce petition ready. Same day, your credit card issuer needs to receive the fraud dispute. I've drafted the supporting letter. Victor's analysis goes with it. Your mall photographs go with it. The argument is straightforward. The card was in your name. The purchases were made by your wife, and the documentation shows those purchases were made for the direct benefit of a third party with whom she had an undisclosed financial arrangement." She paused. "The bank will open a formal investigation. That process takes time, but it begins Thursday. And the civil suit? Filed Thursday afternoon. Recovery of the $67,000 in diverted marital funds. We're naming Camille as primary defendant." She picked up her pen. "I want you to let me handle the sequencing. Everything lands the same day. The divorce petition, the fraud dispute, the civil filing." She looked at him steadily. "She doesn't get a warning. She doesn't get a window. It all arrives at once." Darius was quiet for a moment. "Where will the divorce papers be served?" Adrienne's expression stayed even. "Her office. At noon." He said nothing. He thought about the small staff Camille kept at her consultancy. 2 young women who admired her, who believed in the version of her that she performed every day. He did not feel satisfaction about that detail. He felt nothing about it at all. That was simply where she would be. That was where the papers would go. "All right," he said. He stood. They shook hands. She walked him to the door and told him she would send confirmation once everything had been filed. Thursday arrived gray and quiet. Darius was at his office by 7. He reviewed 2 sets of contractor proposals, responded to a structural query from a site manager in Decatur, and ate a sandwich at his desk at noon without checking his phone. At 1:15, he called his bank. He canceled the unlimited card and opened the fraud dispute. He provided the case number Adrienne had given him and confirmed that the supporting documentation package had already been submitted. The representative on the line walked through the standard language. Darius answered each question directly. The representative told him the fraud investigation was now open, and that he would receive written confirmation within 5 business days. He thanked her and ended the call. He sat for a moment with his phone face down on the desk. Then he packed up his bag, locked the office, and drove home. He cooked simply. Chicken, rice, sliced tomatoes, with a little salt. He ate at the kitchen table with the evening news on the television in the next room. A story about road construction, a story about a local school, the weather, normal things, unremarkable things. He washed his plate and his glass and set them in the rack to dry. By 9:30, he was showered and in bed with the lamp off. He lay on his back in the dark and listened to the house settle. The small sounds it made, the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the tick of the cooling ductwork, the ordinary sounds of a structure doing what it was built to do. He was asleep before 10. The process server arrived at 11:58. Camille's consultancy occupied a small suite on the second floor of a mixed-use building in Buckhead. Exposed brick, a glass front door with the company name printed in brushed gold lettering, two young women at clean white desks who believed in her completely. The server was a middle-aged man in a gray jacket. He asked for Camille Okafor by full name. One of the young women called back to her office. Camille came out, smoothing her blazer, the easy smile already arranged on her face. He handed her the envelope and said her name again, formally. Said the words that make an envelope official. Said she had been served. The smile didn't fall. It dissolved. Slowly. The way ice goes. Not all at once, but from the edges first. She stood in her own office holding the envelope with both hands while her two employees looked at the tops of their desks. She called at 2:09. Darius was at his drafting table. He watched his phone screen. Let it ring. She called at 2:31, at 2:44, at 3:02. At 3:17, he heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. He was already standing when the car door shut. He walked to the front door and opened it before she reached the step. She looked like someone who had been holding something heavy for 3 hours and was only now letting herself feel the weight of it. Her eyes were sharp and scanning, moving across his face the way you look for a crack in a wall. Some sign of weakness, some place to push. Her jaw was set. Her hands were still. She had not been crying. That told him something. He studied her for one quiet moment. "Come inside," he said. "We should talk." Rochelle was at the kitchen table. Reading glasses on, notepad open to a fresh page, pen resting beside it. She had positioned herself at the far end, leaving the two seats across from each other for Darius and Camille. She did not greet Camille. She simply looked at her with the particular stillness of a woman who has already formed her full opinion and has no use for pretense. Camille stopped in the kitchen doorway. "Why is she here?" she said. "Sit down, Camille," Darius said. Something in his voice, its flatness, its complete absence of apology, moved her forward. She sat. He sat across from her. Between them, the kitchen table was bare. He reached to the chair beside him and lifted a folder. He opened it without rushing. The first page he set down was the credit card statement from Phipps Plaza. The charges listed in a clean column. The total at the bottom. Camille looked at it, said nothing. The second page was a photograph, clear and sharp, taken through the glass of the watch boutique. Preston's wrist extended across the counter. Camille's hand holding Darius's card out to the sales associate. "I was there," Darius said simply. "I watched you." Something shifted behind her eyes. Not guilt. Calculation. He kept going. One page at a time. The bank transfer records, 26 months of small withdrawals, the amounts modest enough to avoid notice, the total printed in bold at the bottom, $67,420. The business filings showing Preston's brokerage as the second largest client of her consultancy, the contract dated 14 months before the shopping trip. Victor's summary of the inflated billing and the third-party payments routed back to her. Then the PI's photographs. 2 weeks of them. Preston's condo. A restaurant on the east side. A hotel receipt printed from a public record. Preston and Camille, documented with the patience and detail of someone being paid to be thorough. Darius set the last photograph down and folded his hands. Camille stared at the spread of paper across the table. For a long moment, the kitchen was silent, except for Rochelle's pen making a small mark on her notepad. "This isn't what you think," Camille said. Darius said nothing. "Preston is a business contact. Some of these, the trips, the dinners, those were work." She straightened in her chair. "You took photographs out of context." Darius said nothing. Her voice shifted, sharper now, leaning into something. "And even if things weren't perfect between us, Darius, you have to understand what it's been like. You're never here. Not really. You're in this house, and you're still somewhere else." Her chin came up. "You don't get to act like this is all my doing when you checked out of this marriage years ago." Rochelle wrote something on her notepad. Darius watched Camille's face, watched the performance of it, the way she arranged her words like furniture, trying to fill the room with them so there was no space left for his. He let her finish. He waited 3 full seconds after she stopped speaking. Then he said, "The divorce petition was filed yesterday morning. The civil suit was filed yesterday afternoon. The bank opened a fraud investigation yesterday afternoon." He paused. "None of that can be reversed." The performance stopped. What was left was just her face, stripped of its arrangement, cold and very still. She did not say she was sorry. She sat in the silence of someone who has just understood, fully and finally, that the ground they were standing on is already gone. Darius stood. "You have until Friday to arrange for your things to be collected," he said. "My attorney will handle everything else." He walked to the front door and held it open. She left. Darius did not have to do anything else. That was the part no one outside of him and Rochelle and Victor would ever fully understand. He had built the structure, set the load-bearing pieces in place, and now, the way it works with any well-designed building, gravity was doing the rest. The bank moved fast. Fraud investigators are trained to look for patterns, and the pattern here was not subtle. Darius's mall photographs showed Camille's hand sliding his card across the counter of a men's watch boutique while standing beside a man who was not her husband. The PI's documentation showed that same man, Preston Wakefield, meeting Camille repeatedly over a 2-week period. Victor's financial summary laid out, in clean and numbered detail, how the purchases had benefited a third party from the very first swipe. The bank's letter arrived at Camille's new address on a Tuesday. Darius did not see the letter, but Adrienne confirmed it had been sent. Formal notification, potential personal liability, full balance, $106,240. Darius was reviewing material samples for a client project when Adrienne called to tell him. He thanked her and went back to the samples. The civil suit moved through channels the way legal documents do, quietly, with bureaucratic patience, until it reached someone for whom it was not quiet at all. Preston's private lender received the required legal disclosure as a matter of procedure. The suit named Preston's brokerage in connection with payments characterized as fraudulently diverted marital assets. The lender, a private equity firm that had extended Preston $340,000 against his commercial investments, both of which were already in default, read the disclosure and made a simple calculation. They called the note full balance, immediate. Preston's plan, the one he had been holding together with the careful tension of a man balancing too many things in 2 hands, had always depended on the condo sale closing first. The sale would cover the lender. The lender would give him room. Room would give him time. The civil litigation made the condo sale impossible to close cleanly. No buyer's attorney would allow it. The note sat there, called and due, with nothing underneath it. The Georgia Real Estate Commission opened its review of Preston's brokerage license the same week. Victor's financial analysis had flagged the payment irregularities to Adrienne, and Adrienne had flagged them to the commission in a single well-documented letter. The commission did not move fast, but it moved. And once a license review opens, the industry knows. Preston's phone got quiet in the way that phones get quiet when people start waiting to see which way something falls. He called on a Thursday afternoon at 4:47. Darius was in his truck, heading back from a site visit, when the number came up, unfamiliar, but he had been given it by Adrian, so he would recognize it. He pulled into a gas station, put the truck in park, and accepted the call. He pressed the button on his phone that started the recording app, a habit Adrian had recommended the week before. Darius. Preston's voice was measured, practiced. The voice of a man who had decided, on the drive to wherever he was calling from, exactly what tone he was going to use. Reasonable, collegial, one professional to another. I think there's been some escalation here that doesn't benefit anybody. I'd like to talk about resolving this in a way that's clean for both of us, man to man, before this gets any bigger than it needs to be. He kept talking. He used the word resolution 3 times. He used the phrase mutual benefit twice. He did not mention Camille. He did not mention the watch, or the luggage, or the hotel, or the $340,000 he owed people who were now standing at his door. Darius sat in the driver's seat of his parked truck and listened to all of it. He let Preston finish completely. Then he said, "You used my money to stay afloat while sleeping with my wife." The line was quiet. There is no quiet version of this. Darius's voice was level, unhurried. Goodbye. He ended the call, labeled the recording with the date and time, and forwarded it to Adrian with a single line of text. From Preston Wakefield. Recorded with disclosure, for the file. Then he pulled out of the gas station and drove home. The payment processor froze Camille's consultancy account on a Friday. Standard procedure during an active fraud investigation. Any account identified in the financial trail gets flagged until the review is complete. Camille had no other revenue stream. Preston's brokerage, her second-largest client, was no longer a functioning business. The 2 young women at the white desks in the Buckhead suite found other jobs within the month. The brushed gold lettering on the glass front door stayed up longer than the company did. Preston Wakefield's brokerage closed its doors on a gray Wednesday morning with no announcement and no explanation posted on its website. The website simply stopped loading. Camille, now without the consultancy income she had built on Darius's foundation, without the credit access she had treated as unlimited, and without the house she had lived in for 7 years, was left to stand in the wreckage of an exit strategy that had never once accounted for the possibility that Darius was paying attention. The request came through Adrian's office on a Monday morning, a handwritten note relayed by Camille's new attorney. No attorneys present, just the 2 of them, a chance to talk. Camille had written the word "please" at the bottom of the note and underlined it once. Adrian called Darius and read it to him over the phone. "You don't have to," she said. "Nothing about this helps or hurts the case, either way." "I know," Darius said. "Tell her yes." Adrian paused. "Any particular reason?" He thought about it for a moment, about the things he had not said in the kitchen that night, the things he had deliberately held back, because Rochelle was there taking notes, and Camille was still an opposing party, and the moment had demanded precision rather than truth. "I have some things I want to say," he told Adrian, "and I want to say them to her face." He chose the location. She agreed without pushback. Sable's Coffee was a narrow shop on a tree-lined street in Kirkwood, the neighborhood where they had both lived in their early 30s, before they were married, before they were even serious. They had walked to this block on their 3rd date and stood outside arguing cheerfully about whether the coffee there was actually good or just conveniently located. Camille had laughed so hard at something he said that she spilled her cup on her own shoe and laughed harder at that. He had loved her then. He wanted to remember that he had loved her then. He arrived 10 minutes early and took a table near the window, ordered a black coffee, watched the street. Camille walked in at 11:05. He recognized her before she saw him, and in that half-second, before she spotted him and adjusted, he saw something he had not expected. She looked smaller, not physically, but in the way a person looks when the thing they have been leaning on is gone, and they have not yet found their balance. Her posture was careful. Her eyes moved across the room quickly, checking exits without meaning to. She sat down across from him, did not order anything. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Sure," Darius said. A short silence. The coffee shop made its quiet sounds around them. The hiss of the espresso machine, two people laughing softly at the counter, a chair scraping the floor somewhere behind him. Camille started with the apology. It came out in careful, measured sentences, each word placed like something fragile. She was sorry. She knew she had hurt him. She never wanted it to go this far. It was not what she had planned. Darius said nothing. He let her talk. Then she moved into the justification. She had felt unseen, she said. She had felt like a footnote in the life he was building. She wasn't saying it was right, but he had to understand she was lonely, and Preston had made her feel like a person again, not just a wife who got folded into somebody else's plans. Darius kept his eyes on her face. He said nothing. Then came the appeal. Did he remember the trip they took to Savannah for their 5th anniversary? Did he remember how good things were between them once? 9 years was not nothing. They had built something real together, even if it ended badly. She hoped he could hold on to that. She hoped, somewhere, he could remember her as the person she was before all of this. Darius wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. He said nothing. Then the bitterness arrived, thin and poorly disguised, the way it always is when someone has run out of softer options. Her voice tightened at the edges. She said she understood he was hurt, and she understood he needed to protect himself legally. But he had to know that what he did went further than it needed to. He had gone after her income, her business. He had gone after Preston in ways that cascaded far beyond what was fair. "You didn't have to destroy everything," she said. She held his gaze when she said it, like she still believed, somewhere underneath it all, that she was the one who had been wronged. Darius let the words sit on the table between them. Then he set down his cup. "I loved you," he said. "I want to start there, because I need you to know that part is true. I loved you without reservation. I worked the way I worked because I thought I was building something for both of us." He paused, not for effect, because the next part cost something to say. "The card was not a trap. I want you to understand that. I gave you that card because I was hoping to be wrong. I was hoping you'd come home that evening and tell me about something you bought yourself, something small. And we'd have dinner, and I'd know I had nothing to worry about." He looked at her steadily. "That was what I was hoping for." Camille's eyes had gone very still. "I drove to Phipps Plaza because I told myself I just needed to see. I wasn't going to confront anybody. I was just going to look." His voice didn't waver. "I stood at that railing, and I watched you slide my card across the counter for his watch. And then I watched you reach across that table and put your hand over his." He stopped. 45 seconds. That's how long I stood there. And in those 45 seconds, 9 years were over. The espresso machine hissed softly behind him. "I forgive you," Darius said. "Not for you. For me. So I can put it down and not carry it." He met her eyes one last time. "But I need you to hear this clearly. The forgiveness doesn't change a single thing about the legal proceedings, not one line." Camille opened her mouth, then closed it. Whatever she had prepared for, it was not this. Darius lifted his coffee cup and finished what was left. He set it down without a sound. He reached into his jacket pocket, counted out exact change, and placed it on the table beside the cup. He stood, pushed his chair back neatly. He did not look at her again. The afternoon light was pale and cool in the parking lot. Rochelle was leaning against the passenger side of his truck, a white styrofoam container balanced in the crook of her arm, her reading glasses pushed up on top of her head the way she always forgot about them. She looked at him when he came through the door. How'd it go? Darius reached her and stopped. He breathed in once, slowly, and felt something in his chest release. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way pressure leaves a room when a window is finally opened. "It's done," he said. Rochelle nodded like she already knew that. She held the container out to him, and he took it. They leaned against the truck side by side, pulled the lids back, and ate in the parking lot with the windows down. The pencil moved before his eyes fully adjusted to the light. That was how it had always been for Darius. The body knowing what the mind needed before the mind got around to asking. His hand found the drafting table, found the pencil, found the line. The rest of him caught up somewhere around the second cup of coffee. But the table was different now. The room was different. The loft sat on the third floor of a converted warehouse in Reynoldstown, a neighborhood Darius had driven through for years on his way to other places, always noticing the bones of it, the way the old industrial buildings held their shape even after everything around them changed. He had bought the building 14 months ago, during the worst of it, when he needed something to do with his hands that wasn't grief. He had drawn the renovation plans himself, at a folding table in his aunt's spare bedroom, while Adrienne's legal machinery moved through the courts without him. He had built the loft to fit no one but himself. The ceilings were high and bare. The east wall was almost entirely glass now, his own design, and in the mornings the light came in flat and gray and clean, spreading itself across the concrete floor like it had somewhere to be. His drafting table sat facing that wall. The framed blueprints were back on the other walls, but there were new ones among them, bigger ones. He reached for his coffee and looked at what was in front of him. The Mixed-Use Development Commission, the largest project of his career, was spread across 3 overlapping sheets of drafting paper, annotated in his careful handwriting along every margin. A community anchor building in a West Atlanta corridor that had been waiting 20 years for someone to build it right. The city had reviewed 12 firms. They had called Darius's firm first. 2 new associates worked in the office downstairs now. Smart, quiet people who asked good questions and stayed late because they wanted to, not because he asked them to. He had not had to explain to either of them what the work was for. They already understood. His phone was face up on the corner of the table. Sunday was 2 days away, which meant Rochelle would call at noon with whatever she had read that week, and opinions she did not soften, and at least one piece of information about a neighbor he had never met. He looked forward to it every time in a way he never bothered to explain to anyone. Victor had sent a photograph the previous week, himself in a pale blue suit, holding a newborn in the crook of his arm with the careful terror of a man who was very aware he was holding a newborn. "Godfather duties," the caption read. "Send help." Darius had laughed at his desk, alone, long enough to startle himself. The civil suit had settled 8 months ago. $81,000, drawn from Camille's portion of the marital home sale. The $67,000 she had moved quietly into the dark, plus legal costs. Adrienne had called him with the number, and he had written it down on a notepad and then set the notepad aside and gone back to work. There was no celebration in it. It was not a victory. It was a correction. Preston Wakefield's brokerage had closed before the settlement was even finalized. Victor, in one of his typically short updates, had mentioned that Preston was now working property management for a mid-sized firm in Charlotte. Entry-level, from what Victor could tell. The kind of job Preston would have sneered at 3 years ago. Darius had not thought about Preston in several weeks. That felt right. He had met Nadia Forrest in Savannah. at a 2-day professional conference held in a renovated hotel on the river. Her firm had been brought in to design the green space component of a shared public project, the same project 2 of his firm's preliminary drawings had been shortlisted for. They ended up at the same dinner table on the first night, introduced by a mutual colleague who said, "You two should talk," and then wandered off before either of them could object. They talked for 3 hours, not about the project, mostly about the way landscape architecture and structural work kept circling each other without touching enough, about the drive it took to build a firm from nothing when nobody handed you a client list, about her mother, who gardened with a seriousness that bordered on devotion, about his father and the fountainhead, and the specific weight of being raised by people who believed deeply that excellence was its own argument. She made him laugh twice before the appetizers arrived. He made her laugh once, which felt like the harder achievement. She was direct in the way of someone who had stopped worrying about whether directness was likable. She was warm without needing him to confirm it. Talking to her did not cost him anything. No calculation, no monitoring, no low-level awareness of what impression he was making. He had forgotten that conversations could feel like that. At the end of the evening, when the table was clearing and the waitstaff were moving with intent, Darius gathered his jacket from the back of his chair and looked at her. "Would you want to get coffee before the morning sessions?" he asked. Nadia looked at him, easy and unguarded. "Yeah," she said. "I would." Now, in the pale gray light of a Tuesday morning, Darius looked at the blueprints spread across his table. He picked up his pencil. The best structures are not the ones that look the most impressive from the outside. They are the ones built on the right foundation, inspected thoroughly, load-tested, and raised without shortcuts. Everything else is just a building waiting to fall. He drew the next line. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear.